Hello and good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. Welcome to tonight's stream. We're getting excited to be able to start showing you off the Darknet badge for DEF CON 31. So it's the Darknet 12th gen, while we have the NG for next gen. We're going to go through and talk about how to get yourself up and running with the do-it-yourself badge this year. So we're going to be showing you some of the cool stuff that's coming along, how to get yourself up and running. We've already released on how and where to go get some of the different parts, and I've got myself and Digital both on to get you up and running. So, Digital, how is it going tonight for you, my friend?
It's going pretty well. Took a little longer to get set up than originally planned, but everything seems to be working for now. But I expect at least two things to go wrong.
Right. I mean, so a little bit late, but you know what? That's okay. We're here. And the cool thing is, this is not going to be like the only stream that's going to be going on the channel. We're going through and constantly updating the different ways how to get yourself up and started. Some of the stuff we're going to at least cover once and be able to help answer any live questions that folks have. And then we're also doing deeper dive tutorial videos that are being posted daily throughout this week. So if you missed something this week, it's not a big deal. Hit us up, put us a comment inside of either the blog on our Darknet NG website or on side of the YouTube channels. Right, Digital?
Yep.
Fantastic. All right, then I'm going to switch the webcam back here just for half a second, and then I'll hand it back over to you, Digital. So, hey, if you've already gone through and you've gotten your box, which is the TTGO LoRa 32, the 915 megahertz radio, we gave you at least 4 different places that you can go pick this up from. We're still looking to be able to get a discount code for the Rockland folks. So if you haven't bought your badge already, you still have something like 50 days to be able to get it from DEF CON. So when you're going through and unboxing this, it's really straightforward. You take it out of the case here. It's not very hard, right? You've got a couple other components that are also inside of the case, which you've got your antenna, you've got a battery cable, which you're not going to need. You've got a couple of pins here that you're also not going to need to do any soldering on this year, which is kind of awesome. So then it's just going to be the antenna and the badge. Now, one of the important things that we want to make sure to point out is that do not power the badge on until you've attached the antenna. So even though, hey, you're so close, you're ready to go, just hang on a second. We're going to hand things over. I'm going to hand it over to Digital to be able to have him show you where not only you can get the badge files that we're posting online now, and then how to go through and attach that into the case. So, Digital, I'll hand that to you. And you're muted, Digital.
All right. So, as Gator mentioned, we do have the different devices. I've got a couple here because we've been doing all kinds of testing. So, set aside our finished one. You've got the badge itself, which comes with the antenna and everything to assemble. We also recommended getting one of the batteries. We've been using the 3000 milliamp hours test with the JST 1.25 small connector. And then you might also want to grab a right angle connector that is a female or a male to female. That way you can set up your antenna to be on a right angle. Why that's important is because of the case we designed. It is a 3D printed case in 4 parts. We have a front that will show the screen through. You have the main case, the back, and then a power bar. So this will be actually how you're able to turn it on and off. The way to insert it is to take the antenna and line it up with the hole on the inside. And that'll fit down in. And then you can slide in the bar to be able to line it up with the switch. And then as you can see, you can push it either way, and that'll turn it on and off. Now this case isn't quite finished yet, but it was a little bit easier to demonstrate on. So for the full assembly, I'll switch to mine. That unfortunately is a little all black, so a little harder to see the details, but same idea. You can insert it. I think this is also a little tighter than the other ones.
I think that was a version or two before we did the 8.6 for what it's worth.
Okay, so this was slightly older, but same process where you would fit the case on top, fit it on the back, and of course install the power bar. And then you have plenty of room to attach the antenna straight out or with the right angle, because by default we've designed it with a lanyard holder, so it would hang from a lanyard vertically. And if you use the right angle, then it comes right off and hangs vertically orientation, so it should get better reception as well. Those files, where did you say we were going to post those, Gator?
Those are going to be on our Darknet NG GitHub page. It'll be underneath Darknet NG 12 badge. And the cool thing is those are all open source. So if you want to be able to download that STL file and you want to be able to go through and modify it, we'll be having a couple videos on how to do that if you've never worked with it before. And absolutely feel free to do a modification with this. Whether you want to modify the actual body of the case or the faceplate, the backplate. When Digital and I were both going through and designing this, we decided to make things a little bit more roomy because some people have their 3D printers tuned in just right. Some of them are a little bit sloppy. So we made the case so it's easier to assemble. But if you've got a well-tuned machine, there are a lot of cool things you could do to make this even tighter tolerances. So we're open and wanting to be able to see what type of cases you guys design and modify here in the future.
So, as with the tolerance things, different slicers will also produce different supports. So this one that Gator sent me had supports all over around here. So it is a little rough, if you can see on the profile there. So you might take an X-Acto knife to try and clean it up, or instead using tweezers that I had at the time, a pair of needle nose pliers will make it much easier to get those removed. The one thing I found interesting on his is I don't think it printed a support in this hole, but on mine, it did print a single support along that hole. So that's another thing to look out for, as well as inside there, how well your printer can do overhangs. Of course, with sharp knives, always be careful so you don't wind up cutting yourself as you like to do with sharp implements. We've tried to minimize the amount of cleanup there is, but there is some because of the tighter tolerances with trying to get the screen to fit properly. So there will also be some along this little path here for the USB cable, as well as around the screen will need some cleanup. And of course, any other modifications you may make, like say, adding a strap to the back to be able to clip it to your backpack. You could have a little piece that comes up over and open on this end and one on this end. So you slide a strap in and have it hanging off the lanyard from the strap instead of the clip at the end. I think that covers most of the assembly things that we've run into.
Yes.
We welcome people to remix. We have plenty of room that you can make all kinds of changes to the front. There's nothing planned for over here, so if you want to add a logo or something, or leave room for a sticker or something. There is also the option that on these, you can add 2 solder points to add a additional button that comes on some of the larger devices in the Meshtastic called the user button. That lets you flip between the screens to be able to see it versus just having everything on your phone. So you could have a little round hole here and use one of the surface mount buttons to add a button to advance through those screens on the device itself.
Along with that, when you're talking about, you mentioned what software we're going through and actually using digital. And I think we've hinted here and there between us posting on Twitter, following a couple projects and whatnot. The software that we're going to go through and install on this is called Meshtastic. So there's a couple different ways for you to go through and set that up. You can set it up on Mac, Windows, and Linux. We're focusing, starting off with, if you're running with Linux, we'll have instructions and videos as well on how to go through and set up your environment to flash Meshtastic onto these devices. But Digital, do you have an example for us tonight on how to get up and running with it?
Give me a second here.
All good. Take your time. And for what it's worth, when Digital is going through and getting that set up, when it comes to modifying the 3D prints, You can do that with AutoCAD. You can do that with a couple other softwares. There's also free software called like Tinkercad, where you can jump in, throw it up online, do some tweaks to it, and then download the STL file to go print off. So with that, I'll hand it back to digital.
Okay, so here I'm SSH'd into my Linux box that's running behind me. And given that we've been doing a lot of testing, I've created a script to automate a lot of this. So what I do is I actually go through and use ESP chip ID to grab the MAC address of the device, as well as the exact chip version, because we're dealing with two different versions of the hardware. It saves both of those into variables, and then goes ahead and sets some variables for the long name of the device, a short name, those are both required, and then if I want to set up specific channels and Wi-Fi. After it does that for all my various different devices, it'll go through and do the install. So in this case, Meshtastic provides a zip file download that includes this device install.sh, and then you just specify the firmware. So in this case, it's for the T-Beam, or the T-LoRa is the one that we're specifically using for the contest. The versions on these are changing very frequently, and we've noticed big changes between different ones. So we're trying to keep up to date with the latest beta releases. Right now I'm using the 2.11 or 2.1.11. They do have 2.1.14 in the beta phase. They also have a couple alphas, like right now they have the 2.1.15 alpha, and those tend to skip. So if they release a beta, it'll have its own version number. It's not that the 2.1.15 will become a beta. That'll always be an alpha.
Now, along with that, depending on how many, when we've been testing this and using this for our use cases, it's been updating fairly quickly, like once or twice a week. So the
Mhm.
pro about this is that it does not matter what version of software you have installed, you can still interact with each other. It's not dependent on everybody being on the same version, which is great.
Yeah, so if you have more than one device installed as well, you might need to do a dash dash port and then specify the dev or the device where it's at on Linux. So in this case, I was only ever doing one at a time, so I didn't do that. After that, you can have the Meshtastic app go through and set the region, which will specify the frequencies you're allowed to use, as different places in the world have different allocations. In the US, we're specifically using the 915 megahertz, so that needs to be in place. And it won't do anything until you set that. This also goes through and sets the owner and the short name. And then after that, my MQT channel that I've been playing with. Some Wi-Fi. That way you can get connected over Wi-Fi. You can also use Bluetooth to your phone using the Meshtastic app. So that's how we would primarily see people interacting with it at the con. Is you'll have it with the battery turned on, connected over Bluetooth, and you can work with it there, or connect it over serial to your computer and work with it that way. So that's my script for it. Since I made a change. The links on the Meshtastic websites have good documentation on how to get it. As far as installing it, it's all Python and pip3. So it's pretty quick. Once you have those installed, it has the dependencies and shows you how to do all that as well. So I'll get set up with the Meshtastic app where you can set those variables, as well as doing the API. If you want to be able to program it into Python, it also has the option to be able to do stuff that way.
So lots of really cool things hooking into Daemon, hooking into CTFD for this year. And the awesome thing is, not only if you're geographically in the area of some other Darknet agents, you're able to message each other offline with this LoRa chip, which is pretty awesome. The cool thing is, not only can you use this before the conference, you can use it at the conference. This is also using a protocol that other people are using for disaster preparedness as well. So this is something that you're able to actually use as a tool long-term wise. So kind of cool. And I went through and posted a link in the chat, and we'll also obviously put that in the description as well for you to go grab that STL file. Right now, we'll upload a couple different versions, a STL file that's got all the parts on a single bed. For what it's worth, it'll look something like this. I'll switch the webcam real quick. It'll look something like this if you're printing it off on a Prusa printer. Uh, there'll be videos on disassembling that, cleaning that up as well. But from there, you can go through. We'll also upload individual parts as well. So if you just want to modify the face, you can do that. You don't have to download and modify the entire thing. So Digital also said that there's a way for you to go through and set things up via an app, a mobile app. He has gone through and automated it to where it makes it easier to get up and running through your network and through your Wi-Fi. There will also be videos on how to hook that up with either an Android, iPhone, Apple app to be able to interface with it. So if we're going to skip over that for tonight, there'll be a video posted on that. How do we interact with it from there, Digital?
So now I've got it set up that now we're into Firefox, and I've connected by the IP address, and it has this nice interface where you can be able to see everything. So by default, it will ask you, let me go ahead and show you the full setup. If I go to the IP, this is actually a generic interface that you can control more than one device from. So you just click new connection. It'll default to the IP address you've already connected to. So you can just hit connect, and it'll go ahead and populate. So from here, I would just use two different tabs in this case, but we can go through. You get your messages here. So we've got our channels of the primary, and then in my case, I set up an MQT channel, as well as peers that I can see. So these are all different devices that I've worked with and are stored in the database on the device of what I've interacted with. So if I type hello, you can see a status icon of 3 dots saying it's working on sending. And now it says a check showing it was sent. And if I come over to this one, you can see it was received on my other device.
So you
And
have two
here,
devices in the room.
yep. I have quite a few. Right now I've got the 2 active, so that's why in this one you see a bigger list, and in this one you see a smaller one.
Gotcha.
If your primary channel was set to the same name and password, you will also be able to send private messages that are encrypted by default with a public encryption key. So you may need to do some changes there to be able to make that a little bit more secure. But in this case, I can say hello back. And again, it goes through and has the dots. And come over here. If I find the right one that is, it
Right.
should show up.
So it's still not the checkbox yet, right?
Yep.
Still sending. So the LoRa can take a little bit of time to send the message, and so because LoRa is based on long range radio, that could take a couple different tries as well, and those are all configurable to change on how often it tries. And Digital in my testing as well, we've gotten about a mile and a half just off these itty bitty antennas.
I'm not sure because the message came through.
Hey, we just got hello and hello back.
I sent another one there. So
Oh, okay,
in this
got
case,
it,
this device is the C4B0, which is the MAC address. So that's where you can see the name of it. It hasn't updated to the proper one.
got
And
it.
then I'm trying to send it to the E node. So
And on these, mhm.
I may have these primary channels messed up, so that might be why it's not going through.
Gotcha. So there's more to explore here, where we're going to
Mhm.
go through that as part of the case file as well. So we wanted to be able to at least get some folks up and running and be able to play with it. Let's see. Beyond the, hang on, I'm seeing something in chat here. Yes, we will absolutely have the broken out components. So then, if you just want to be able to do the face, you'll be able to do that. If you want to just do the power bar or the body itself, each one of those will be uploaded. Literally, just give me about 10 minutes after we're done with the stream, and I'll upload each one of those parts individually. And they are all underneath the Creative Commons. So mix it, remix it. Just let folks know where you found the original, and we'll go from there. I want to see what designs people come up with too, because I swear, Digital and I went through. I've got like 12 cases behind me of different iterations. So the version 8.6 is, uh, I've got a lot of plastic that's been spent at this point. So I'd love to see other people's designs for sure.
So then you can also see on here you have map. The devices we recommended don't have a GPS module, but there are other ones that do, such as the bigger T-beam. That would actually show GPS information that gets broadcast every 15 minutes. There are ways to turn it off, but we figured it was simpler just to leave those off for the one we recommended.
Absolutely. Which gives you some cool things if you're talking about using these in an emergency situation. Also, if you go through and you use the application on your phone, whether it's Android or iOS, you actually have a toggle to be able to use your phone GPS and tie it to your Meshtastic. That's turned off by default, so you would have to manually go in and turn that on if you wanted to share your device location. So full disclosure there, but kind of cool for what you can go through and see how far these different devices are talking with each other.
And here under config, you get most of your major settings. So you've got what kind of role. Most people will be using client, but there are also things like a router, which will give, it changes how exactly the packets get spread through the network as it sets up its mesh. If you have a device that you have high on a mountain, you can set it as a router, so the devices will prefer to send it first to be able to get better coverage. There's also repeaters that'll just repeat things to get better coverage by you making chains. And then I think tracker is new because I've not seen
That
that one
is new.
before.
Yeah.
So that may just be like in ham radio, you have APRS where you can set up a radio to just broadcast a tracking signal. That may be the same thing where you can use a GPS enabled LoRa device and track where it is through that option. You have the device's serial console, and if you want to enable it, debug, as I mentioned, you can solder on a button, and then you can specify which pin it's going to be on, as well as you can add a buzzer. So if you want it to make a sound whenever it receives a message, you can enable that as well. You can change how it's rebroadcasting. Generally, you want to leave it on all, especially in our cases, because we want to get as much coverage as possible. Because there's a few other groups that have been interested in doing LoRa that we don't want to cut them off from being able to use our stuff as well. There's the position where if you do have a GPS module, you can turn it off, as well as turning off GPS. How often it transmits, which pins it goes over for the GPS modules. You can change power savings to have it last longer. The 3000 milliamp battery lasts a decent time, but we're also not transmitting for 8 hours a day. So
Right.
that may be a useful feature once you start getting a lot more messages in a confined area. The network lets you set up your Wi-Fi config. So here you can see my Wi-Fi network and password that is hidden, as well as if you have a module that can support Ethernet, there are those options. If you want to do any specific IP configuration or rsyslog. Different display settings for how long the display stays on, units they want to use. If it'll cycle through windows, by default it won't. So if you decide not to do a button, you could change this to be, say, 30 seconds. That way, every 30 seconds, it'll change to your next screen. That way, you actually see the different messages as they come through without a button. Depending on how you want to orient your device, you can also flip the screen. That's everything there. On the LoRa, I'm not sure why that's unset in there because that is set on this one. By default, it's 3 hops. That might be a setting that we recommend changing once we see how it starts working. And then by default, it is long fast, but you have other options where you can try and do a very long, but it's slower. So it takes a longer time to be able to actually send a message, but it, in theory, gets a longer range. Same way, you can go shorter to get it even faster, depending on what bandwidth you want to be able to use. This has to be aimed for all devices in the mesh. Otherwise, they won't be able to communicate with each other.
So by default, we are keeping it with the long fast to get up and running.
Yep. So if you're getting into experimenting with LoRa, there's a lot of little tweaking options that you can do to do more experimental things with these. That's the idea with us going with off-the-shelf hardware this time, is that it makes it easier for us to get something deployed quickly, but it's also more useful. It's not just something to hang on your wall. You might go camping or hiking where now you can use these to communicate with each other over distance. And as well, the Bluetooth, these devices have a screen on them, so they will do the randomized pin. Other ones that don't, because they don't come with a screen by default, so you can set a pin as well. There's also the channel configs where you can store up to 8 channels by default, or 8 channels total. You can choose primary, there's only one, and then all the rest will become secondary. Set pre-shared keys, so if you want to have a network that's restricted to just your friends, as well as having the primary, maybe a DEF CON specific one, a Darknet specific one, or any other things that end up coming out. You can set the name of the channel. So the one I was using was MQTT, and then the primary just doesn't have a name by default.
So,
The
Digital, what is an MQTT?
So MQTT is a Mosquito protocol that's designed for IoT devices. It's a centralized messaging server that operates on the publish subscribe method, where you have devices that can publish to a channel and others that can subscribe. So a thermometer can publish a temperature, and then other devices can subscribe to that channel to see what the temperature is coming off that device. In this case, you can set channels that go to the MQTT server, publish up to the internet, and then other devices can download from there to make your network broader through the internet.
So, as
And
an
that's
example, in our use case, while you set up your LoRa network, it's interconnecting and meshing within your 5 or 6 devices. I've done the same thing on my side, but then when we both hook up to the same MQTT server, we can both see each other's devices across the internet.
Mhm. And then the way you do that is you have this uplink enabled and downlink enabled. So in the config, there's a different section for modules that includes MQTT where you can set the IP address and passwords. And then you'll turn these on one device. And then that will be the one to relay everything.
Like your gateway, basically, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yep. And the channel numbers and IDs are for uniqueness as well. That way, if you have conflicting names, then that'll help alleviate it as well as identify it within the mesh network. So I go back to
Awesome.
config. Where is it? That's right. It's over here. So you have the device config and then the module config where you have the MQTT settings. And then you have to enable it, set your server address, username and password, as well as if encryption is required.
And for folks to be able to test with that on the MQTT server, it's not needed to start off. You can be able to test if you have multiple devices in your home or within your town. That's great. By this weekend, we will have an MQTT server that you can hook up to and chat with other agents. So this is the spot that you would want to go through and put that information in when we drop that.
There's some range test settings. I think Gator's played with these, but I have not yet. So the idea is that
Absolutely.
you'd be able to have device will actually record if it hears pings as they go out, and you can actually test your range that way. You can store canned messages that you can set a second button to be able to send out default messages. And then our devices don't support this, but if you get ones that have the 2.4 gigahertz, they actually do support audio messaging as well. And the final thing here are the peers. That'll show you the model and the MAC addresses, as well as when it was last heard, and the signal and noise of when it was heard. So you can check actual statistics on how well your device is transmitting.
And that's the quick run through of how to access it on the web interface. It's very similar on the apps for both Android and iOS. They both don't cost any money. So we'll be putting videos online on how to go through and use those here in the next couple of days.
As we said, with the updates, the firmware is getting a lot of updates as well as the apps. I noticed they really revamped the settings on Android, that they're much easier to navigate now instead of being one long list.
Absolutely. So with that, we're super excited to be able to have people join in, be able to get their hardware in hand and start playing with this. If you have any questions, we are in the Discord. We are also constantly checking our YouTube channel comments. If you want to go leave comments on our website at the darknet-ng.network. If there are any questions live on our stream, we'll give folks a minute to be able to go through and ask those and put that up. On positive notes, all of this code is going to be available online, so folks will be able to join in, be able to plug in their micro USB and flash the thumb drives fairly easily. You can go through and go to Meshtastic. The interesting thing is that when Digital and I both started, there was a really cool web flasher that Chrome has broken. And so if you try to go through the process of, oh, there's an easier way to do this, that was true about 6 months ago, not today. So the nice thing is running in Windows, Mac, or Linux, there's only a couple pieces of software that you need to install, and then you can install it all via the command line, which is not that scary. So instead of you trying to go through and do that at this very moment, we will have a link to do so. Mm-hmm. There are other devices that do support Meshtastic. We're specifically picking the T-LoRa's for now because of the small footprint. They'll run a lot longer. If you want to experiment with Meshtastic on other things, go check it out. That's fine. This is where we're going to go through and say, here's what we've gone through and made the badge for, to where we had thought about doing the larger devices, but the badges and the badge hanging on your neck would have been huge. So we decided, hey, let's go with the smaller footprint. We can go with the larger battery and be able to make these super portable then. So in this case, when you're looking at the supported devices, we're doing either the LilyGo T Echo that you can see here, or the LilyGo LoRa. The T-beams are great to be able to play with, but specifically our badges that we're talking about are the LilyGo LoRa. So if you click on this, it'll actually go through and say, hey, here's all the different versions that you can go through and set up. At the very top, you do want to hit that LoRa V2 1-1.6, and then it'll support all these different frequency options. Since we're in the States, it's going to be the 915 megahertz radio that we're going to go through and use. And while we've got these other variation marks, some of the devices that we have additional stickers with these other variations and identifying marks. You should be good to go as long as you're getting that LoRa or following the links that we've put into the badge announcement. Anything that you wanted to go through and add there, Digital?
So I was trying to think about the T Echo. That was actually the other one that we decided not to go with. So it is the T LoRa.
Yes. Yep. We experimented with the T-beam and the T LoRa, and the T LoRa is just the better way to go. Less price. There is no GPS, so nobody's going to dox themselves accidentally from, oh, look, I just hooked myself up online and I really didn't want to share that, versus, hey, I want to be able to share because I'm hiking or whatnot. You have that option in the app later on. Yep. So right now we are not going through and using the micro SD card slot, although there is one on the badge. So if you want to play with that, you absolutely could. And once you've got this flashed, the flashing time only takes about a couple minutes to go through and get up and running. And then any of the updates thereafter takes about half that amount of time. So you don't have to flash it every single time. You can update it. That takes about half. And again, there'll be videos on how to do this on our channel. Anything else that you wanted to highlight?
Nope, I think we covered everything we planned to cover tonight.
Cool. If you go to our website as well with the Darknet NG .network, you can go through and find all this information. And let's see. And then again, what we went through, and I will grab this link and throw it to my other screen and switch over to the laptop screen. Hang on a second. So many different windows going on. We're going to have fun. Okay, transferring over real quick. If you go to our site with inside of our GitHub, you can go get the files on the STLs. I'll upload those other spare pieces as necessary, and continue to follow us on Twitter. Go join our Discord, and we look forward to interacting with y'all, not only online when we're going through and releasing more information for y'all to follow along, but we're here to help when we see you at DEF CON as well. With that, thanks for joining us tonight. Hope you have a wonderful evening. Digital, anything else that you want to close for tonight?
No, that's everything I had. So look forward to talking to everyone online and getting interested in the contest and ready for DEF CON.
All right. Can't believe. So, less than 60 days. Looking forward to this. With that,
I'd say
have a
you've
great,
been kind of off on your countdown.
just a little bit, just a little bit. A couple things going on. So it should be fun. I'm looking forward to seeing folks online, and we will see y'all later.
See you
Peace.
then.